One important point to emphasize is it's not just about having the data. There's really a need for an infrastructure organization that actually manages the collection and ensures that people are using it and helps them figure out the meaning for it. You know, Jeff has a team of 8 people. The Cultural Data Project has a help desk that you can call to figure out how to fill out the forms and what some of the data means. And so I think part of what's happening is not just the development of systems, but the development of a new set of organizations, of infrastructure organizations in the nonprofit sector that enable the kind of learning that this data requires.
We built a comparative data set looking at what students think is really allowing them to get high quality education and what are some of the drivers. And so a couple things, just also piggybacking on some of you know, what Marian was saying. I think we've tried to be very intentional about some of the attributes of the way we've created the program. So we have comparative data. So we're able to say to a school and also to the people who manage schools and people who may fund the schools, here's how this school did, or here's how this group of schools did relative to others. We also really focus on closing the feedback loop with the people that we collect the data from. We heard consistently from both students and school leaders that they're always the input into data, but they're never getting the data back. And so we've kept them as a very clear audience for this. So we make sure that the data goes back to the students, we make sure that the data goes back to the schools, and we work with them to help them interpret the data, and then we aggregate it up and use it for these other audiences.
I think what we did well with the Cultural Data Project was build in a lot of process around help, services, education, training, making the data set and the tool actually useful for the people we were trying to reach out to. But that's also what drives the cost. It would be a very cheap project to do, and it would also be, as I said before, very inert if we didn't have that. So for us, the sustainability issue is how do we strike the balance between continuing to provide really robust services so that it's actually useful and used by our constituencies, and then figuring out how to pay for that without charging the organizations themselves.
The barriers that we find are that the measures, the metrics, the outcomes need to be integral to the organizations themselves. They have to be useful, simple, practical, relevant. If they're not that for the organization, there's no amount of coercion that can make them sustainable over time. So it has to be bottom up in a way. Organizations have to find utility in collecting the information and help in identifying you have to help them find common indicators for the outcomes that they themselves have determined that are important for them. It seems to me, and we've convened many associations and umbrella groups over time to find out what are the barriers for them. What would we have to do to get common indicators across fields? And it's the conversation, it's the building of the common language, indicators from the bottom up that are meaningful to the organizations, and then cutting through all of the data and information that's out there to make simple tools available to the organization.
Failure is we've been talking about success and impact, and we do balance the qualitative with the quantitative, but at the end of the day, we actually want to find failure. And in you know, venture capital in Silicon Valley, failure is a badge of honor. If you haven't succeeded until you failed in a couple of companies. In corporate world, failure is kind of a fact of life. It's not something you seek out, but it happens. In philanthropy, failure is not an option. If I make 3 out of 10 good decisions in my life, I think that's a success. And I would challenge most of you in the room to think about the 3 out of 10 grants that have failed. And one of the biggest barriers to adoption is that people are very concerned that the transparency of the data is going to lead to failure. So creating a safe place where we say, oops, we all make mistakes, this happened, is going to be important for us to encourage people to adopt, people who are taking big, risky bets, to understand and learn from and share from those failures. But in forums like this, it might even be great next year to have a panel on big mistakes in philanthropy, learning from failures, because I know in my own life, it's failures that you learn from, and somehow we need to change the mindset around failures and use the data to understand what we could have known before it happened as a way to inform the kind of decisions that we're seeking to collect the data for.